This 2023-2024 NBA Southwest Division betting preview and win totals edition of the NBA Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by our Patreon. Score exclusive perks, content, and contests, including our NFL win totals contest with a $1,000 prize. Join today at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. Roster brought to you by Parlay Play. Parlay Play is a lead pipe locking for parlaying player props. Go to parlayplay.io and use promo code SGP for a 100% deposit bonus today. Welcome, everyone, to the NBA Gambling Podcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is Monday, August the 7th, currently 12:09 on the East Coast. Here to dig into our Southwest Division betting preview for the 2023-2024 NBA season. And we're a smidge early, but you know how we like to do it here on the NBA pod. We like to get ahead of the numbers and try to get our listeners the best numbers. So we covered the three divisions in the Eastern Conference over the course of the last 2 weeks. So if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to those, highly recommend going back to listen to those. We got some best bets, did some roster breakdowns and all that fun stuff. And now we're headed over to the Western Conference. Like I mentioned, we'll do the Southwest Division today, but I'm joined by my co-host here on the NBA Pods. I got my guy here, Lonte Smith, with me. Lonte, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
Not bad, man. Looking forward to breaking down this division. It's pretty intriguing from top to bottom. I think it's going to be an improved division, and I know we'll get into that in a little while. But yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, a lot of intriguing storylines in this division for sure. Like you talked about, from top to bottom, stuff that happened off the court, on the court stuff, roster turnover. Yeah, a lot of stuff to get into in this Southwest Division. Also joining us here, you guys know him as the voice of the tennis pod in NFL, MLB, NBA, and WNBA. It's Scott Studio Reichel. Scott, what's going on, brother?
They're doing pretty well. Looking forward to going through another division in the NBA. Should be fun. I know that football season is officially upon us because preseason, is right around the corner, but NBA still matters, so we're going to talk about that for now.
Yeah, NBA matters to us for sure. So, like I mentioned, we try to get ahead of the lines before some of these lines do move. I was looking at the odds and the win totals and all that good stuff for this division, and I feel like we were maybe a week or two early because they finally posted play-in tournament odds or teams to participate in the play-in tournaments for the upcoming season. So that's something that we can also discuss as we go along, at least for the Western Conference. But yeah, Southwest Division today, like I mentioned, the five teams in this division: the San Antonio Spurs, the Dallas Mavericks, Houston Rockets, Memphis Grizzlies, and the New Orleans Pelicans. And like Lonte alluded to earlier, I mean, a lot of interesting storylines that are happening in this division. So we'll kick it off with the first team in this division. We'll kind of go top from bottom like we usually do. That's going to be the San Antonio Spurs for this upcoming season. They have a win total right now of 29.5. Their division odds are currently sitting at 55.5. For them to make the playoffs is at, let's see here. What did I write down? Plus 1,100, minus 2,500 to miss the playoffs. And then for them to be a play-in tournament team for this upcoming season, 7-1. Obviously, they get the number one overall pick in the last year's draft. By no surprise, they do pick up Victor Wenbanyama. And also Greg Popovich, Coach Pop, signs a contract extension for whatever reason. And Alano, we talked about it during the regular season last year that we thought that the days were numbered for Coach Pop, or that maybe he would consider retirement. But lo and behold, he signs a contract extension. And now it's Victor Wenbanyama, the face of the franchise for the San Antonio Spurs. So last season, this team ended up with a record of, and let me pull up the standings from last year. Let's see here. 22-60. The two Texas teams by far were two of the worst teams in the Western Conference. It's funny that they ended up with the exact same home record and away record last season, were those two teams. But Lonte, why don't you lead us off with the San Antonio Spurs, man? Obviously not a great year last year. Dealt with a lot of injuries to their roster, but we knew this team was going to be pretty much in tank mode because we knew that they weren't going to be very good this year.
Yep.
And they were going to be in the sweepstakes for the number 1 overall pick for Victor Wenbanyama. Lo and behold, they land the number 1 overall pick in the draft lottery. And now it's Wenbanyama town in San Antonio. But talk to me about the Spurs here, Lonte.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, the big talking point is Wembanyama, and I think he'll be fine. I don't read too much into the summer league. I mean, he had been playing for I think 9-10 months straight at a time. So, of course, he's gonna have some growing pains, and I like the rest of their roster as far as the win total. I'm pretty neutral on. I think it's probably about where it's supposed to be. They did add Reggie Bullock and campaign, look veteran presence. Reggie plays better in the second half of the season, 38% from 3. Campaign 10 points per game, 5 assists. He shot 37% from 3. So they're gonna have a lot of floor spacers. I think they got north of 5 guys that shoot 35% or higher from 3, including those 2 guys. I think the real issue is how well those young wings develop. Branham, I guess Vassell is kind of a guard, but he performed well this year. Branham and Wesley are 2 guys that I'm really looking at to take the next step. I would say to average 12 to 15. Wesley in 37 games, he shot 39% from 3. Branham was kind of up and down. I think he shot 30% from 3, which is not good, but he got the experience of being able to play in some NBA games and play against NBA players. So I think that's pretty valuable here. I mean, they were dead last in pretty much everything last year: offensive rating, defensive rating, 3-point defense. Team shot almost 40% from 3 against them. So I think that'll be improved, of course, with Victor in the middle, and he'll be able to protect the rim a lot better, which gives those guards gives them the ability to be able to push up a lot more and play aggressive defense. So defensively, I think they'll be fine. Offensively, I think they'll be improved also. So I'm looking at an improved team. I mean, but the win total, the West is just so tough. It's just going to be hard for them to, take a significant jump up into the ratings. So if I had to lean away, I would lean slightly over. But overall, I'm interested in seeing this team play. I think they got a lot of talent on the team.
Yeah, I mean, kind of take a look at their roster up and down. They added Devontae Graham, and like you mentioned, they do have a lot of shooters on this roster coming into this year. To surround Victor Wembanyama, Keldon Johnson had a pretty decent year last year for the Spurs. I know Devin Vassell was in and out of the lineup last year for the Spurs as well. So a lot of young talent on this roster, and it's again going to be about developing this talent. I know Greg Popovich we can maybe say that one of the best coaches of all time, or definitely top 5 for sure in the NBA. But is he the right guy to develop this young talent? I'm not convinced on that part. But Scott, what are your thoughts on the Spurs for this upcoming season?
So even though they were pretty much tanking for the last couple months, they still won 22. So I think I'm going to lean over. A question we do have to ask is the win total screwed if Wembanyama only plays 40 games? If you assume he gets injured, are they screwed? Maybe. Are they going to tank again if he gets hurt? I don't know. That's always something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to lean over, though. I'm really not that sold on the rest of this division. I think that you can make an argument that some of these teams, maybe if you're high on the Rockets, maybe they'll be the team that wins mid-30s, but I'm lower on the Rockets than most people probably are. But I think I'm going to lean to the over on San Antonio. I just feel like 29.5 is too low. I saw some potential growth from the younger guys when they were playing a bunch of these meaningless games at the end of the year, and I do think that adding Wembanyama helps. I do have to question, though, how immediately he's going to dominate, or if he's going to dominate at all in the first year or two, because maybe there's going to be some growing pains involved. But I think defensively they're going to be a lot better, because Wembanyama, worst case scenario, is an immediate elite rim protector, kind of like what we've seen from Holmgren in a way, where they're both undersized. They're going, in terms of weight, they're going to give up a lot of potential mismatches against Embiid and some other elite centers, but the rim protection you can't really deny. So I do think that San Antonio's paint defense should be better, because at least they get some rim protection. Wembanyama can also space the floor, and I do think that you're looking at the Spurs being a very interesting team with a decent amount of young talent. And I do think that when you're looking at this overall roster, besides Wembanyama, they do have a couple of intriguing pieces who are younger. I'm not sure if they're going to immediately, become leap-worthy candidates to make serious, I'd say, threats at an all-star game or anything like that. But, I mean, if you want just some examples of that, Vassell, by the way, only played 38 games last year. Some of it was some borderline tanking, so we'll see what happens. But Sohan got hurt, Vassell got hurt, Keldon missed about 19 games.
Yeah.
I think all three of those players are solid young players, and Sohan and Wemby is a disgusting defensive combination. That's a really, really good duo there that can really make life difficult for other teams offensively. I'm going to lean over. I think it's going to be close. I'm not picking the Spurs to make the playoffs. Can I see 32 wins? Sure. I'll give them low 30s.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, they only had maybe 5 players that actually did play 60-plus games, but it wasn't a lot of their key guys. I mean, you mentioned Devin Vassell missed more than half of the season. I thought, Trey Jones was one of their pleasant surprises last year. I think that he's really going to develop into being a great point guard for this team.
They traded away Pirtle, who was one of their better players midway through the year. Like, they didn't have any centers. I feel like Wenbanyama is going to help with that.
Yeah. I'm surprised, Scott, you didn't mention your MVP last year when you were talking about player props on this roster.
Oh, Branham?
No.
Why? Branham did well for me in the last couple of...
Yeah, I thought you were going to mention Sandro Mamachumishvili.
Oh, Mamukashvili, of course. Yeah. He only cashed the double-double for me once, but, I mean, the points were there at the end of the year, so...
Yeah.
I didn't mention him because he's probably never going to play again, but still, I just wanted to... thank you for bringing that up, because that guy was my Moses Brown, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all cashed a lot of props with Malachi Branham last year. And again, I really do like this roster. Again, we talk about obviously adding Victor Wembanyama, the veteran presence that they also added as well. And you always need shooters around, high-end talent like Victor, because he's just going to command so much attention, at least, early on. And we'll see how, number one, how Coach Pop works some of these rotations and who's going to be on the floor with Victor Wembanyama and things like that. So I think that might just open up the floor for guys like Keldon Johnson, and Devin Vassell and Jeremy Sohan as well. So I'm agree with you guys. I do like the over here as well. I think the number that popped into my head was what Scott mentioned in that 32 to 34 range. Barring some significant injuries. Again, that's always a concern for any team in any sport, but the talent is definitely there for this team to definitely get over this projection of 29.5. Anything else to add for the Spurs here, guys?
I think even without Victor, they can still be competitive. Just the roster.
They can try to be.
Yeah, they can shoot the ball. Well, I guess it depends on the mindset of the team in the front office. But
that was my point, because last year, before they fully pulled the plug, they weren't that bad. They weren't good. But then it felt like they just lost every game for about 2 straight months because they literally stopped trying.
Right. And then, they got shooters. Like, literally, they got a bevy of shooters. Like, so, defensively, without Victor, it's obviously going to be harder. Collins actually stayed healthier than he has probably since he was at Gonzaga. I like Dominic Barlow. He performed pretty well in the summer league. I think he'll be fine for them, like backing up Victor. I think they'll be fine. They were second in pace, so they're going to run and gun. A lot of upside there. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll at least be competitive, but the win total is probably right where I would put it.
Yeah, and I think that obviously they got their guy, right? Like, they got the prized, the prospect that everybody wanted. That's going to change the face of their franchise. So, there's no reason really for them to tank unless they're just so bad offensively or even defensively. But now it's just a time for them to go out and be relevant again for the San Antonio Spurs team. So we'll see what transpires for them for this upcoming season. But again, all of us at least leaning towards the over for the San Antonio Spurs. All right, guys, before we get over to the Houston Rockets, let me tell everyone about the Sports Gambling Podcast Patreon page. Sign up for the Patreon to get access to exclusive contests, including the NFL Win Totals contest with a $1,000 first place prize. Besides season-long contests, they also have weekly contests just for patrons, plus a monthly SGP Stories podcast, completely ad-free and full of behind-the-scenes stories from SGPN. There's even a Discord channel just for patrons. Only you can prevent corporate gambling. to do your part and sign up today. Go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. Again, that's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. All right, guys. The next team in this division is going to be another Texas team that, to expectations, is not supposed to have another great season. But the Rockets do come in with a win total of the 31.5. I think that's I want to say a 7-game improvement from last year for this Rockets team. Their division
I think
9. Was it 22.5 last year?
Oh, I think it was 20. Was it 22 or 23.5? One of those numbers.
I do remember like 22.5, 23.5. So maybe the closing number was 23.5 for this team. But nonetheless, this season the Rockets come in with a win total of 31.5, division odds of 40-1. For them to make the playoffs right now is at plus 600. For them to miss the playoffs, minus 900. And for them to be a play-in tournament team, currently sits at 4-1. Obviously, the big news for the Houston Rockets, a new head coach by the name of Ime Udoka comes over to take over for Steven Silas. And they drafted number 4 overall pick in Amen Thompson. And a lot of roster turnover for this Rockets team as well. I think there's still some decisions to be made for this Rockets team. And I'm speaking on that because I am a Rockets fan down here in Houston. The offseason, I know when we did our free agency recap show that I know a lot of people questioned on why they signed Dillon Brooks to a huge contract and also Fred VanVleet to a huge contract as well. But again, they had about $60 million to spend in the offseason. Also signed veteran Jeff Green. He makes his return to the Rockets. I know he was there during the Harden and I believe the CP3 and Westbrook era. Jock Lindell to beef up the front court for this Rockets center position. Cam Whitmore, the number 20 overall pick as well for the Houston Rockets. And also, like I mentioned, Amen Thompson, the number 4 overall pick for the Houston Rockets to add to this roster that already had guys by the name of Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, Kevin Porter Jr., Tari Eason. So again, a lot of talent on this roster for this Rockets team. And again, a huge job right now for Ime Udoka to kind of figure out, number one, what's going to be the identity of this team. Because, and I can speak to this over the last 2 seasons, there really wasn't an identity for this Rockets team, especially on the offensive end, right? He didn't know who to run the offense through, whether it was going to be Jalen Green or whether that was going to be Şengün. And I think that Ime Udoka will find that identity for this Rockets team. But Scott, let me start with you for the Houston Rockets, currently sitting at 31.5 for their win total.
The way that I see it, one of these 2 teams has to go over, either the Spurs or the Rockets, in my opinion. And for me, I'm going with San Antonio. This number's too high for Houston. I feel like the argument is Udoka has definitely gotten some respect after bringing the Celtics to the finals and after seeing what happened afterwards when he left, because I think we all know that the Celtics looked a lot worse in terms of coaching after Udoka left. Having said that, watching Udoka late in games, I didn't think he was a great coach either late in games, and people kind of forgot about it because of how bad they were this past season. But I think Udoka is going to try to instill a much more accountable, I'd say, which might be extremely ironic because of what happened off the court. But I think he's going to hold his players more accountable on the court. The problem with that is I don't think the personnel is actually going to be held accountable. I'm not sure if anybody's ever told Jalen Green to play defense in his entire life. And the same thing can be said about Kevin Porter Jr. It's one thing to say it's good to get some discipline and it's good to, try to instill those values in young players. Doesn't mean they're going to listen. In fact, I would be shocked if Kevin Porter actually did listen when his coach yelled at him, because we know Kevin Porter kind of has a short fuse and he might ditch a game at halftime, which we've seen before too. But I think I'm going to go for this one with the under. I really didn't like their offseason. I'm not a VanVleet guy. He's roughly a 40% shooter in his career, so I don't think he's going to help much, not to mention the fact that Jalen and Kevin Porter all want to shoot, and we know there's one basketball. Dillon Brooks, I don't think it's a terrible fit because he's going to try to guard somebody, and he's going to be that type of, physical defender who's going to take some pressure off, but that doesn't change the fact that Dillon Brooks is still also a chucker, and he's not a very efficient shooter either. I just don't see a very good offensive team. I think that you're looking at a couple of intriguing young players like Eason and Şengün. I think Şengün and Udoka are going to hate each other because Şengün doesn't play any defense. So I don't see Şengün having a great year under Udoka. I hope I'm wrong because I like him as a player, but I'm going to lean under. I just don't like the overall moves they made offensively. I still don't think they're going to be very good because they have a lot of inefficient shooters on the court, and there's only one basketball. So I'm on the under for Houston. I think it's a lot more likely this team falls apart than overachieves. So give me the Rockets to probably win. To be honest, I got them at like 25. I really don't think they're going to be that close. And you could talk about tanking potentially if the team performs poorly. I think they're a last place team. So I think they're probably going to end up punting some games late in the year. But I'm low on Houston. I'm on the under.
I think for me, like when I'm looking at this roster, is that it's difficult to figure out like how the offense is going to work because you have a guy that you're paying about close to $41 million in Fred VanVleet. Obviously, he's going to be a starter, but he's going to be more of a facilitator for this team that you're paying $41 million to. Jalen Green, we've seen, especially in the second half of years in his first two seasons, really, we've seen the upside for Jalen Green. Like he can go out and be a 25 to 27 points per night type of player.
Can he play off ball though?
Yeah, and that's the question, right? Like, in being down here in Houston, like the theme for me, like some of the other fans that I've talked to, it's like the theme is coming in, like it's let's see what Udoka does. Let's see what transpires after the last two seasons, after the post-Harden era. That Steven Silas, I think, was put in a very difficult situation because I've mentioned this multiple times that he thought coming into this Rockets team when he was initially hired that he thought he was going to coach James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and those type of guys. And then immediately fat suit James Harden comes out, he gets traded. Russell Westbrook follows in suit, and now he's dealt his cards of having all these young talent on this team. But I mean, look, look, I haven't mentioned Jabari Smith's name. Amen Thompson in those, Lonte will expand on this. He looked pretty good to me, Amen Thompson, in those first couple games that he did play. So I think that's just going to take away from like you having to play Fred VanVleet so many minutes because you're paying him $41 million that you're not going to be able to let some of these guys get run and showcase what they're going to be able to do. Guys like Amen Thompson. I thought Jabari Smith had a really good off-season and also summer league games. There's 2 games where he put a back-to-back 30-plus point games. So have Cam Whitmore. He was a bright spot for the Rockets in the summer league as well. So it's like, do you play these veteran guys or do you want to put your young talent out there, let them develop and see what you got? Because the Rockets were kind of in this mindset, or they were in the struggle that because you had so much money to spend in cap space that you had to use it somewhere. They unfortunately used it on Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks. I think Dillon Brooks is going to be okay because he will bring that defensive identity like Scott mentioned. Because again, this Rockets team the past 2 seasons has been absolutely atrocious on the defensive side of the basketball. So,
I don't think he's good, but at least he tries on defense. He can maybe encourage effort on that end of the floor.
Yeah. So I think that'll be, what Dillon Brooks does. Hopefully he doesn't chuck up threes because I will pull my hair out. But Lonte, talk to me about this Rockets roster, man, because you've really been on top of all these young, talented guys coming out of the college ranks and in the G League as well.
Yeah, so I got a lot of questions about Houston. Mostly you just hit on all of it. Like I don't think they have a true identity. I don't know what they're going to be. I mean, the biggest question is, can Jalen Green be your number one? I don't know if he can. I know he can't defensively. That backcourt defensively is probably going to get torched with him, VanVleet. If you go to the 3-guard lineup with Christopher, if you want to get more versatile as far as
scoring. A very undersized regular.
Right. They're gonna get cooked in the Western Conference. Like you got to think about the front courts in the Western Conference. Like as far as just guards,
like the front courts or the back courts, because their front court defense might not be good either. So
the backcourt. I'm sorry, their backcourt defense. Yeah, I mean their backcourt guards. You're gonna have to go against like some juggernaut guards, big physical guards. And I mean I'm high on Amen Thompson, but again, you're paying Fred VanVleet all this money. Jalen Green's going to play. I mean, where does he get his minutes? I think this roster is like 10 deep with guys who can probably play, but you got to figure out who's going to do what, who's going to, mesh with who. I mean, Jabari, he looked like he took the next step. But again, You got Dylan Brooks, and I don't know if he's going to be in front or starting beside him. I don't know how that's going to work. And I mean, let's not forget, I mean, in Boston, they weren't like ascending until after that All-Star break when something clicked with Ime. They were kind of, somewhat of a disappointment at the start of that season, and then it clicked. So I think they'll be fine going forward once they find their identity. But until then, I'm not sure if they can get to this win total. I mean, you mentioned Van Vliet. I mean, 39 and 34% shooting splits. He will cut down on those turnovers if he's able to handle the ball. They were 30th in turnover percentage on offense, so he will get that down. He doesn't turn the ball over a ton. 7.2 assists per game. I like Dylan Brooks. I think he's fun. And just defense, what he brings defensively, that's a kind of a mentality you want to feed your younger players. Now, if they are going to buy into that is another thing. But again, I think, Amin should be on the court more than Fred, to be honest. I mean, I know they paid him, but like upside wise, like he can dribble. He's a big guard. He can defend better. We like in the small sample size that we saw, when he was playing, I thought he did a good job. He can rebound. I mean,
that's kind of the problem. I don't think they're going to play him.
Yeah, no, I don't know how much he plays. Like that's the thing. And then you got Whitmore, who is pretty much the same player as Josh Christopher. I mean, they're both go-getters. They're not going to pass the ball a lot. They're not going to.
I think Whitmore's going to play a lot more than Christopher, in my opinion.
But Christopher they traded.
Not Christopher. I mean, KPJ. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm talking about KPJ.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I think that once again, you're probably going to see KPJ potentially move to a bench role, but knowing his tendency to have some outbursts, I think there's going to be some turmoil between Porter Jr. and also maybe even Jalen Green. Once again, Udoka's a no-nonsense coach. All Jalen Green has been given is nonsense because they let him do whatever he wanted for the first couple of years of his career. There's going to be a lot of growing pains here. And you mentioned that there's a lot of players on the roster who want to play, and they all want to shoot. Like, I think there's going to be some serious problems early on before Houston eventually trades maybe half the team. Like, I think that at this point they have so much young talent that they don't have enough room for all of them. They're going to have to try to package a couple of them for maybe a guy down the road. But for this core, I think Udoka is going to be way too harsh, and he's going to shatter some egos early on, rightfully so. But I think the young players aren't ready to handle that yet. So I'm going to go with the under.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And another thing, I mean, you got Jock Landale too. They just signed him for a decent amount. So I mean, they were first in rim rate as far as getting to the rim, but last in finishing. So does anybody on the roster like going to improve that? I don't think so. I mean, they were 30th in 3-point percentage. So it's just a lot of questions that I don't think they have answers to right away. Now, can they be competitive? I think so. I think they can be competitive, but it's going to come later in the season, much like he had in his tenure in Boston. You mentioned Kevin Porter to the 6-man role. I kind of like his 6-man of the year odds at 25-1. I mean, he was 19 points per game, 6 assists, 5 rebounds, shot 37% from 3. Now the volume is obviously going to go down, but again, he's going to be playing with the second unit. So he'll have more opportunities. From what I'm thinking, he'll have more opportunities to be able to get his shots up. He's going to get his shots up regardless. It's just how efficient is he going to be. So I think he's a good bet at 25-1 for that 6-man of the year. But overall, I'm going on the under for Houston.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the under here as well. I think this team is probably in the range of 27, 28, 29 wins, 27, 29.
I was even lower because I said 25. But
and again, I just don't even know who's going to be in that starting lineup. I mean, if you put a gun to my head right now, I think it's Van Vliet, Dylan Brooks, Jalen, Jabari, and
Udoka's picking the veterans.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains. And again, I agree with Scott that at some point we may just have to trade some of these guys that are either in the starting lineup or are on the coming off of the bench, because I think KPJ is probably going to be that odd man out. And who knows? I mean, there's already rumbles that maybe you even want to trade out Jalen Green if he doesn't develop properly for this Rockets team. But again, I feel like there's a lot more questions than answers right now for this Rockets team.
Do you think the Spurs finish with a better record?
I think about the same.
I think the Spurs may.
I was just wondering if we agree that Houston's a last place team.
I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I think Houston will be better than San Antonio. I don't know. Maybe like 20, in between 25 to 28 wins for both. I think it's in the realm. I mean, it's not far off. So.
All right, guys, before we get over to the next team in this division, let me tell you guys about the newest sponsor on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. That's going to be Parlay Play. We're brought to you by Parlay Play. Parlay Play is a great way to get down on your favorite parlayed player props. Football season is right around the corner, and Parlay Play will have all your favorite props. Parlay Play is available in a ton of states, including California and Texas. Plus, our good friends up north, Parlay Play is available in a bunch of provinces in Canada. And when you sign up with our code, you'll get a sweet bonus to get started. Head over to parlayplay.io and use promo code SGP for a 100% deposit bonus of up to $100. Again, that's parlayplay.io, promo code SGP. All right, guys, let's get over to the next team in this division. That is going to be the New Orleans Pelicans. They come in with a win total for the next season of 43.5. Their division's odds currently sit at plus 255. For them to make the playoffs, minus 150, to miss plus 120, and for them to be a play-in tournament team at plus 140. Last season, this team ended up as the number 10th seed with a 42-40 record. They were a play-in tournament team. And obviously, the last season, the big thing was with Zion Williamson, right? He missed pretty much more than half of the season last year. I'm trying to pull up the exact numbers here on how many games he did miss last year. So Zion last year only played in 29 games, but he looked really good in those 29 games, right? He finished with averaging 26 points per game, had 7 rebounds, 4.6 assists, 1.1 steals for the New Orleans Pelicans. Again, there were a lot of rumors of him possibly coming back towards the end of the season to help make that playoff push or at least become a team within that 1-6 range. But that just didn't transpire. All the offseason stuff that we heard about with Zion, again, we don't need to get into the details, all of it, but it almost seems like that it may just come to a point for this Pelicans team on where they have to make a decision that, hey, Zion, are you all in for this Pelicans team, or are we going to have to explore a trade for you and ship you off and get some assets back to build around guys like Brandon Ingram for this team? And you take a look at some of the offseason moves that were made for this Pelicans team. We know they lost Jackson Hayes to the LA Lakers. Willie Hernangomez, also currently a free agent. Josh Richardson leaves in free agency for the Miami Heat, and Garrett Temple was waived by the Pelicans. The draft, they added Jordan Hawkins out of UConn with a number 14 overall pick, and they added some type of depth in the front court with Cody Zeller. They were able to re-sign Herb Jones to a qualifying offer and also a 2-way contract with Ohio State player from a couple seasons ago, E.J. Liddell. Lonte, lead us off here with the New Orleans Pelicans. 43.5 is the current win total for this team. Do you think they can put it together, or is it just too many distractions, especially with what's going on with Zion right now?
Yeah, so Zion aside, I think this number, I would go over this number if he wasn't on the team as currently constructed. I just think they're talented enough to get over this number. They finished off a little bit stronger. The thing is, obviously, is with the health, especially with Brandon Ingram. Like, he has to stay healthy. Jordan Hawkins, like him as a player, don't like to fit here. I think he would have fit better somewhere else because, again, you're log jammed at that forward position. You're going to play behind Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, who had an incredible year. Herb Jones is going to be in there for defense purposes. So, again, how many minutes is going to be allocated to him? I know he's probably going to get on the court, but, again, I thought they could have used a point guard. They don't have a traditional point guard, which I think would make their lives a whole lot easier. Like, say, for instance, if they had a Chris Paul or Tyus Jones, Trey Jones, just somebody who can set the table for some of these guys. CJ McCollum, nice combo guard, but again, getting up there in age, I don't think he's the best option at point guard for the team. I think he's better fitted as, two guard on the wing. So that's where I have problems with. If you insert Zion, if he plays, 25 to 30 games, which is notoriously what he's played in the last 3 years. I got him at 114 games played in 3 years. So that's like
that's less than 40 a year.
Yeah, that's like 46% of games. If you just account for that, I guess he plays what, 30, 32, 33 games?
So his first 3 years, rookie year, he played 24 games. Last season, 29. His highlighted year was at 2020-21 season where he did play 61 games.
Okay,
but
yeah.
that might just be an outlier.
That's bumping the average up, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, when he's out there, of course, he's phenomenal. I mean, 26, 7, and 4 in his career, 61% from the field. I mean, he changes the dynamic of everything. But again, you're counting on him to just be there and be consistent. And all the, of course, in the offseason, everybody's bigger, stronger, faster. Everybody's doing the right thing. I heard Larry Nance on a podcast with Ryan Russillo was saying that, they were frustrated that he wasn't able to be on the court, but it wasn't necessarily because of him specifically. It was just that they were ravaged with injuries, per se. Now, whether he's sugarcoating that, obviously it's his teammate. He's not going to talk bad about him, but I mean, he spoke highly of him as far as being around the team and such and things like that. But I'm basing this off just Zion playing like 20 to 25 games. I'm not really accounting for him being there consistently. And I think the team has a chance to go over. I think they'll make a move for a point guard later in the season. I mean, they were defensively is their main issue at the rim. I mean, Jonas is decent offensively, but I mean, they were 30th in rim percentage allowed. So teams were able to get at the rim and score at will. They did defend the 3 well, first in 3-point percentage defense, 6th in defensive rating on the year. So defensively, I think they're fine. It's just that the health of Brandon Ingram and getting a point guard in there is my main issue. But again, still loaded with talent. I'll still go over. And I'm basing this off like little to no Zion at all. So I'm pretty strong with the over here.
Scott?
I'm going to go with the over as well. It feels like with all the turmoil this team dealt with and how Zion got injured and everything like that, they still won 42 games. It felt like they were a lot worse when you think about all the drama that unfolded during either the offseason or during the actual season regarding Zion. They're still a solid team. The only real question mark that I have, besides the obvious injury concerns, is how good of a coach Willie Green actually is. I think he's okay. Like, I don't think he's amazing. I don't think he's that bad, but I do think when you're looking at this team, and once again, I think San Antonio is going to win somewhere in the low 30s. I think Houston's going to be a bottom feeder. There are some wins to be had. And I do think with New Orleans, assuming that either Zion or Ingram stay healthy for at least 50, 60 games. I know it's a big if. Zion's done it once. If one of those two stay healthy for 60 games, this team's going to win probably closer to like 45. It's going to be close. I really do like their overall roster, though. I'm a big Murphy guy. I always have been, and he's turned into a really solid player. Grand Theft Alvarado is pretty good, too. But I think when you're looking at this overall core, they had a lot of injuries last year, and they still managed to win 42. Yes, if Zion gets hurt, then you have a potential crisis on your hands. But they've been there before. And even with Zion getting hurt last year, playing 20 games and change, they still had a winning record. They still made the play-in. This team, in my opinion, would be buying at the deadline because they're in too deep already. So I don't really see them blowing it up. So I think that's going to definitely be a good reason why you should like the over, because they're more likely to go for it in the second half than roll over. But I'm going to lean over. It's going to be close, though, but I could see them winning 45.
Yeah, I know this.
Before you go, Munaf, Ingram 45 games last year, so I mean that's not really
like if he gets 50, 60, they're going
over.
Yeah,
if he gets to 52, 53, I think he'll be fine. And it was reported that CJ was playing a little banged up also. So, I mean, I think Ingram is the catalyst there. Even without Zion, Scott, you touched on it. I think they're just more equipped to be able to handle, playing without him. So it's not like it's going to be their first time. So, yeah, that's another reason why I like the over.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pointed out, I mean, they had a lot of, at least to their main players or their main scorers, their top guys, the top end talent, right? Zion, 29 games, Brandon Ingram, 45. But other than that, relatively, the other teams were healthy, or the other players, I'm sorry, were healthy. CJ McCollum, like you just mentioned, Lonte, that he was playing hurt, whether it was a wrist injury or whatever the case might, even a shoulder injury for CJ McCollum. But he played
Alvarado and Jones, though, each missed 16-plus games. Alvarado was a pretty solid bench player for them, and Jones is their best defensive player.
Yeah.
So they had other injuries, but still.
So, yeah, injury luck obviously wasn't on the side of the Pelicans last year. So even if you're able to get another 10 games out of both Zion and Brandon Ingram, that would definitely push them over this number of 43.5 for this upcoming season. And I know we were high on the Pelicans 2 seasons ago. And again, I think that you guys nailed it, so I'm not going to regurgitate everything, but the talent is definitely on this team. If their top end talent is able to stay healthy and play 50 to 55 games for the upcoming season, this team could definitely get over this number of 43.5. All right, guys, let's get over to the next team in this division, and that is going to be the Memphis Grizzlies. Currently, they are tied for, or not tied, I should say, have the same win total as the Dallas Mavericks at 45.5. The Grizzlies are the second favorite in this division. It's very, very slightly. You can almost say co-favorites with the Mavericks. Grizzlies plus 160 for the division for them to make the playoffs, minus 250. 2-1 to miss the playoffs, and then for them to be a play-in tournament team is at plus 140. Obviously, the big news for this Grizzlies team is the suspension of Ja Morant for 25 games. They will be without their best player for that span. Also,
did the Grizzlies win that suspension? Because I thought it was going to be like 40 or 50. Like I
I
thought
thought
25
so
was
too.
actually pretty light.
I thought that it'll be at least for half of the season at minimum. That was like in my head.
I think I think the 25 games is basically so he can't make any NBA teams with the new rules, right? He can't make any NBA first, second, or third teams. I don't think.
Yeah, because you
so
have to
just
play
mostly impacts the
65,
money.
right?
Yeah, because you got to play 65, so he
Yeah,
won't,
so
he,
it
wou- he
takes
wouldn't
away
be
the
able.
money from-
Yeah,
yeah,
he
okay.
wouldn't be able to play. So I mean, I think it's smart
Right.
I think it's smart by Silver. Obviously, you don't want to damage the product too much, but again, you still want to put proper punishment on it. So yeah, I think it was smart by him because I mean he won't be able for any incentives as far as season long things. So I mean I think they won, but again, Ja lost. Obviously, I mean
I forgot to factor that in, that once again he's not going to qualify for any of the NBA teams
Yep.
because of the new stipulation. But
Yep.
I'm also going to throw it out there that with Ja missing 25 games, I'm not saying he's going to be healthy the rest of the season anyway, but he usually misses 20-something games a season, so Memphis might be accustomed to playing without him. But
Yeah.
there's another huge loss that you're about to mention.
Trey Jones heads over
Tyus.
to Tyus Jones, I'm sorry, heads
Yeah.
over to the Washington Wizards as part of a trade that God, I don't remember what that trade was for. It wasn't a 3-team deal, was it?
It was a 3-team.
Yeah, I think it was.
With
That
Marcus
was the
Smart.
deal
That was the Beal trade, wasn't
yeah,
it?
that was the Beal trade. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
and then
he
they got
heads
Marcus
over.
Smart.
Yeah. So they head over to. So Tyus Jones heads over to the Washington Wizards. In comes Marcus Smart to kind of take the place of Ja Morant while he's out, and also Tyus Jones, him being traded to the Washington Wizards. They also signed a Derrick Rose to maybe add some depth. I'm not sure if he's going to get a lot of playing time. Talked about Josh Christopher with the Rockets. He got traded from Houston to Memphis here. So some guard depth while Ja Morant is out for this team. And also, like Scott mentioned, that he hasn't been healthy for the Grizzlies throughout his career. So last season, he played in 61 games, started 59 of those. Prior to that, 57 games, 63, and then 67 in his rookie year.
Well, it was 61, but he took a leave, right, for like a week or two?
Yeah, I think they had him go to like the rehab down in Florida as part of what was kind of transpiring with him off the court. Take a look at this roster, guys. Obviously, they signed Desmond Bane to the huge contract in the offseason. I'm trying to pull up their exact roster here. Give me a second. All right. So Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, Steven Adams missed a big chunk of the final couple of months there for the Memphis Grizzlies. And there's some young talent as well on this team. Obviously, didn't even mention Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. for this team. 43.5 right now, Scott. What are you thinking about this Memphis team? Because there's a lot of moving parts to this team with the Ja Morant injury and integrating new players like Marcus Smart, Derrick Rose, if he does get any playing. But mostly it's going to be Marcus Smart that's going to be that starting point guard for this team.
Yeah, we also did not mention that Dillon Brooks is no longer there, for better or worse.
Dillon Brooks, yeah.
So Marcus Smart's going to basically take his role as the defensive stopper. The problem is I think Marcus Smart's reputation of being a great defender is more based on the past than the present. Let's put it that way. I don't think Smart's been a great defensive player for a couple of years at this point, but he's kind of been coasting off the defensive player of the year reputation that he arguably didn't deserve, but it's a separate story. I'm going to go with the under on this one. I have too many question marks about the overall core of this team without Ja for 20 plus games. mainly because at least in the past, I knew that they could get by it because Tyus Jones was a really good backup point guard who can provide stability for the offense when Ja was out. Without him, I don't really know what their plan is. Are you making Marcus Smart your point guard? Because we know how that's going to go. It's not going to go well. So I don't think they really have a great option to deal with the first 25 games where Ja is not there. And if you want to talk about what else they can potentially do, I have questions about the offense because we know that, for example, Desmond Bane's a solid number 2 option, maybe number 3 option for a title team, but still, we know he's solid. Jaren Jackson has apparently made some serious strides this offseason, and I believe he was basically voted the most valuable player for the Team USA scrimmages that have been going on for the last couple of weeks. They're very high on Jaren Jackson. Apparently, he's been very good during those scrimmages, but still, he has injury issues in his own right every year, so that's going to be a question mark. I don't want to say that Tyus Jones is going to swing their win total by like 15, but with Ja's suspension combined with Tyus not being there, that's a massive problem because he was such a very big stabilizer for this team when Ja got injured at some point during the season. I think losing Dylan Brooks is fine, but I don't think Marcus Smart's very good. I've been anti-Marcus Smart for a long time, and I don't think it's a coincidence that he holds the record for most games played as a Celtic without winning a title. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think that he's a championship level player. So I'm going to go with the under. I think this team's going to underachieve. They won 51 last year, and I do think Ja, in addition to missing all those games to start the year, will probably get hurt at some point because of the reckless style of play that he ends up playing with. We love him for it, but he just can't stay healthy playing like that. So I'm going to go with the under. I see too many question marks here. I think this team is going to end up in the playoffs. I think they'll probably be a 6 or a 7. But I really just think that with Ja being out and with Tyus not being there anymore to save the offense when he's gone from a point guard perspective, and me really not liking Marcus Smart as a point guard, I think all three of those join together for the under. I'm going to go with the under. It's a good reason why they dropped this win total by 6. I think it's warranted. I'm going to go with a 43-win season.
Even last year they won 51 games, but it's pretty much that the rest of the division was absolutely shit, right? I mean, we talked about the Rockets.
It was real, even Dallas, like the whole division was bad.
Yeah, like Dallas as well. And then we talked about the injuries that the Pelicans had last year. And I mean, I know this team, also Memphis team, was they had an injury bug as well, but I think they had enough depth at the right time for them to propel them to win 51 games. And I think I love the point that you made, Scott, that if they still had Tyus Jones on this team, like, you know what offense that Taylor Jenkins is trying to run, that he already knows what it's like to play without John Morant. But now you're bringing a guy like Marcus Smart. We all agree it's definitely a downgrade from Tyus Jones for this specific team.
At least offensively, people would still argue that Marcus Smart's a great defensive player.
Yeah.
I disagree, but he's still an above average defensive player.
Yeah. And then your top 2 scorers last year, John Morant, obviously 26.2 points, Desmond Bane, 21.5 points, and then Jaren Jackson Jr. Did play 63 games last year at 18.6. And again, he was in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. I believe he did win it last year, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I agree with you, Scott. I do like the under for this Memphis Grizzlies team. Again, we talk about this whole division as a whole, but again, a lot of moving parts for this Memphis Grizzlies roster as well. So I'm on the under for this Memphis Grizzlies team here. Lonte, what are your thoughts on the Memphis Grizzlies?
You have a number in mind? I said like 43. Are you in the same? I don't think they're going to miss the playoffs, but I think they'll be below this number.
Their number was what, 45.5, I said?
Yeah. Do you think they missed the playoffs? Because
I don't
right now,
there's no way. It's no way they missed the playoffs.
I don't think they missed the playoffs. Just saying. I think they could definitely be a play-in tournament team.
That's plus 140.
Yeah, 40. Yeah, I think you hit the number on the head. 43 makes a lot of sense. Like in that range of
43 and 39, something
42
like that.
to 44. I think that's where this team would probably end up here, Lonte.
Yeah, so I was gonna go under also, but I mean, just
don't be contrarian. Join us.
Just like simple math. Like, think about, like, in the last 2 years at home, they've lost a total of 17 games. So I mean, their home court advantage is probably one of the better ones in the NBA. I mean, so it's like I can pencil them in for like between 30 and 35 home games, I guess. So you telling me got to go what? They got to get 16 on the road.
It's about 15 and 26 on the road.
I mean, I think that's fair. And I mean, even if you want to downgrade it a little bit because of Ja, maybe 27, 28 games. I mean, they still they perform really well without him. I mean, lifetime without Ja, at 37 and 24, and they were 11 and 10 last year. And this was without Steven Adams. This was without Brandon Clark. It was also with Dylan Brooks. So again, I mean, it's just a lot of variables here. I think I'm going to lean over, to be honest with you. I think the Marcus Smart, Tyus Jones is pretty much a wash. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I think Marcus Smart will be fine there. The biggest problem that I have with the team is something that they haven't had in a while, and that's they don't have any wings. Like, they don't have any good wings at all. If you look at some of their recent, like even in the playoffs, you can see LeBron kills them. Like during the regular season, Jimmy Butler, all those, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, like all these premier guys, they literally can't be stopped. And this was with Dylan Brooks, who was supposed to be, quote unquote, a plus defender. And I mean, I think he did a solid job, but again, they just don't have any wings to be able to withstand some of the things that you're going to have to do in the West. Now, guard wise, they'll be fine defensively. And of course, in the paint with Steven Adams and Triple J in the middle. I think those two losses, Scott hit on it with with Steven Adams and also Brandon Clark, because that allows, with Steven Adams there, that allows Triple J to kind of roam around and be a roamer. Instead, he was having to guard Anthony Davis. He's getting in foul trouble. He's already prone to being in foul trouble as it is with Steven Adams on the court. So it's a lot of different variables here. I'm gonna lean over. I just think that home court advantage is just big, and they have a formula under Jenkins that they play extremely well in the regular season. Now, when they get to the playoffs, it's a different animal. But again, they're going to be healthier. Ja's getting 25 games to, I guess, do whatever he's going to do.
I think that's my pushback, though. Are they going to be healthy when Ja's automatically missing 25 games, not to mention his injury history? I don't know if there is a guarantee that they're going to be healthier.
I mean, I just don't think
maybe all really around, but Ja's the most valuable player on this team.
Yeah, I mean, he is, but again, they're accustomed to performing without him, and I think they are just at home. Like, of those 25 games, I would have to look at how many are at home, but they won a playoff game against a Lakers team that was rolling without him, and that was on the road.
I'm not going to brag about them winning a playoff game when they were favored in the series.
But I mean,
they lost in 5. Like, that's
they did, but they won it without him, though. Like that, so that just goes to show that they're capable of performing at a high level.
Yeah, they won a game there. They won a game against Golden State the year before when they won the title. Yeah, so but once again, that's with Tyus Jones. I just think it's a totally different team because.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say.
Do you think Marcus Smart's a solid point guard to run your offense? No.
I mean, I think he's probably. I mean, he's fine. I don't think he.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm just not sold on.
But I mean, we're not going to say
Tyus Jones from a guard.
We're just not going to say Tyus Jones is worth 7-8 wins. I mean, he's not worth that.
No, I think it comes down to the fact.
I think Marcus Smart's acquisition was overrated, in my opinion.
I think it comes down to the fact, who do you trust more to run this offense? Is it Tyus Jones, or is it going to be Marcus Smart, right? And I think that.
Oh, yes, sir.
And that's all Marcus Smart is. I mean, he hasn't been the healthiest either. Like, he has those knick-knack injuries throughout the season.
And so is Jaren Jackson. Yeah. Adams, we'll see if he can stay healthy. But there's
Adams
a lot of injury questions with this team.
You saw that?
What
Adams working on his 3-ball.
I did see that. He can join Mitchell Robinson in the offseason 3-point contest.
There should be a big man 3-point shooting contest at All-Star break.
Did Ben Simmons join that or no?
Oh, yeah, you got to throw in Ben Simmons.
He's got the height requirement, but he's technically a guard, so I don't know if he'd be allowed in or not.
Right. That's a good idea. Tell the NBA to cut your check one off.
Anything else for the Pelicans before we get to the Mavericks, guys?
I mean, you mean on the Grizzlies?
Grizzlies.
Oh, sorry, the Grizzlies. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
I was a little bit tempted from hearing the reports during the offseason. I mentioned before about the scrimmages. I thought about maybe Jaren Jackson being most improved, but once Ja comes back, he's going to hijack all the shot attempts. So I don't know if that's going to be a bet that's worth it. Plus, can you really be most improved if you just won Defensive Player of the Year? Like, they just gave you an award. I don't think they're going to give you an award back-to-back years, including most improved, when you just won an award last year. So I thought about it, but I didn't really see it. That was kind of it. That was the only thought I wanted to mention because most improved's a pretty interesting award since nobody knows what the criteria is anymore. The reports during the offseason suggest that Jaren Jackson could be poised for a big year offensively.
Yeah, and they got SGA, who finished top 5 in like MVP vote, and they got him one of the favorites to win Most Improved. So that just goes to show you they have no idea what
Nobody knows anything.
is.
When Ja won it, the entire award went out the window.
Right.
But
getting over to the last team in this division, the Dallas Mavericks. They currently have, like I mentioned, tied win total with the Memphis Grizzlies at 45.5 for this Mavericks team. Last season, this team ended up with a record of, let's see here, 38-44, eliminated from the playoffs, and it was a big head scratcher for us. I think it was the last game of the regular season or last week of the regular season where they just decided to bench Luka and Kyrie Irving when they were, I think,
2 games left.
Yeah, and they were like right in the midst of being that 10 seed and trying to at least get into the play-in tournament, but not a playoff team last year. This upcoming season, obviously, they re-signed Kyrie Irving to the huge deal. And some of the roster moves that they did make, they did lose Davis Bertans, Reggie Bullock, like we talked about, and some of the guys on the bench. Obviously, also Christian Wood is still a free agent as well.
I really like how you threw Bertans out first. Like, that's a massive loss.
I'm just going down the list that I'm looking at as far as
they got his contract off the books. That's what you got to be saying. But yeah,
they added Seth Curry. They signed him to a contract. They added Rashawn Holmes, another undersized big, for this Dallas Mavericks team. Derek Lively, they drafted number 12 overall in the draft this past season. Also Prosper as the number 24 overall pick out of Marquette.
Hang on a second. Dante Exum is on this team?
Hey,
I didn't realize he was back in the NBA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wasn't he overseas last year?
Yeah, he was. I think he was back in Australia.
I didn't realize he was in the league.
He actually was playing well at one point in time.
Oh, I heard he learned how to shoot threes, allegedly.
Yeah.
But he's not been in the NBA since the 2020-2021 season. But former top 5 pick. I wasn't aware he was in the NBA again.
Before he got hurt, I think he was playing pretty well for the Jazz, right? At the end of that little stint.
Yeah.
I think he was playing well.
I think so, but once again, it's been a long time. I'm not saying he's gonna have an impact, but I saw that name and that was a blast from the past.
Grant Williams also on a sign and trade contract ends up on this Dallas Mavericks roster, and obviously, like I mentioned, they re-signed Kyrie Irving and Dwight Powell to
Grant
this
Williams,
roster.
They got
Grant Williams as well, and they also added Mike Miles Jr., an undrafted for I guess we could say free agent in this past draft. A lot of expectations coming into the season for this Dallas Mavericks team when you have a quote-unquote dynamic backcourt with Luka and Kyrie Irving. Obviously, the offensive talent is there for those two players, but defensively, maybe the worst. I don't know if it's a stretch in NBA history with those two guys as your backcourts defensively, at least. But they come in this season with a win total of 45.5. Slightly the division, the odds-on division favorites at plus 155. For them to make the playoffs this upcoming season, they are priced at minus 220. I find it interesting that they have 3 teams in this division that have plus 140 and plus 155 odds to be play-in tournaments teams. Mavericks right now plus 155 to be a play-in tournament team. Lonte, lead us off with this Mavericks team, man. 45.5. What are you thinking about this team? Can they be a 50-win team?
I'm high on the Mavericks, man. I like them. I like them a lot. I like the additions they made in the offseason. I don't love their pace of play, and I think that it's kind of ironic that Jason Kidd, who was in his prime, one of the best, fast break maestros that we've seen, that they're playing slow as I don't know. I mean, I get it. They're playing slow because of Luka, but again, you got to find some kind of pace. I mean, they were 28th in pace, 29th in offensive possession length. So I think they got to kind of speed up and get that offense going a little bit more. But I'm a buyer. I'm a buyer in it. Defensively, I think they'll be somewhat better. Maybe not right away, but with Lively, I guess McGee to a certain degree, I think they'll be decent. Grant Williams on the perimeter, Omax on the perimeter, who's really well switching on different players. He could play multiple positions. His offense is what I'm worried about. But Lively, I think, is going to be a big addition for them. Now he's not going to do much offensively, but I mean, you don't have to. You got two guys who can score north of 40 points a game when they're on. So I'm high on Dallas. I got them to win the division. Got their win total over. Got them 12-1 to win the conference. They added Seth Curry. You said also who's a 41% 3-point shooter. Grant Williams 40%. They can basically space the floor out and put them both, like flatten them both out into the corner. Grant Williams is excellent shooting threes in that corner. I'm a big fan of the team and what they're doing. They were really good defending the three last year. I think that was underrated on their game. 7th in 3-point defense. They were getting to the rim at a decent rate. 7th in rim percentage. 3rd in free throw rate. But again, they didn't shoot free throws at a high clip. They also fouled a lot. 27th in free throw rate defensively. But overall, I like the structure of the team. I think they're kind of building out somewhat of what you saw kind of with their team that went to the finals, to the Western Conference Finals that year. I think they're a lot more talented. Now, again, you are putting your trust in Kyrie to not go off the edge here. But I think a full offseason with him and Luka implementing into that system, I think they'll be fine. So I like the Dallas Mavericks a lot this season.
I think it's really going to come down to, for Jason Kidd in this offense, that it can't be your turn, my turn thing between Luka and Kyrie Irving. Like, there's going to have to be a definitive game plan, an offensive game plan for both of those guys to succeed, and for the team to succeed this upcoming season, right? But because the upside is definitely there for this Mavericks team, Kyrie, when on the floor, one of the best handles I've seen in the entire NBA history. I think a lot of people can also agree with that statement. But again, it just comes down for me defensively between Luka and Kyrie Irving. That are they going to put in that effort? Haven't really done that throughout their career at all. And again, we talk about front court presence for this team, and they really haven't done anything again to address that. And that's my biggest concern as well for this Mavericks team. I mean, Dwight Powell, we've talked a lot about on this podcast, has flashes for this Mavericks team, but I don't think that they're still undersized at that front court position for this Mavericks team. But on paper, the talent is obviously there 100% for this roster. It's just about now Jason Kidd has a lot of pressure of trying to figure it out how he's going to make between Luka and Kyrie Irving. How can they coexist for the success of this team? Because again, there's only one basketball, and both of those guys need the ball to be effective for themselves, for their offensive output, I should say. Scott, thoughts on the Mavericks here, 45.5?
I'm on the under. I think that, once again, this team's not going to be very good. I think they're going to be a borderline playing team. I said borderline because I don't think last year was a fluke. I don't think the core of this team is actually going to be able to win many games because they don't guard anybody. And we talked about it before, and I want to go through some numbers here. I'm going to ask you some trivia questions here. Luka's played 5 seasons in the NBA. Yes. Do you know how many seasons he's played more than 66 games?
0.0 would be my guess.
1. The answer is 1. His rookie season, he played 72. He's played less than 67 in each of the last 4 seasons. Here's another question. Do you know when the last time Kyrie played north of 68 games in a season?
When he was with the Cavs.
Yep.
That is correct. It was his final year with the Cavs in 2016-2017. So in addition to all the problems we're mentioning with the roster, the fact they don't guard anybody, each of these players has not played 70 games in roughly 4 to 5 years minimum. So you're assuming both Luka and Kyrie will each miss 15-plus games in the season based on their injury history. Is that a fair assessment?
My pushback would be is that they probably set Luka for some of those games on back-to-backs just to kind of protect him, quote unquote. But I think
he did get injured anyway with all those rested back-to-backs.
Yeah, and I think, was it last year? Was it this past season, the season before, where he came into quote unquote being in shape, and that hey,
it was last season.
Yeah, he's ready to
It's already circulating this season.
He's gonna win the MVP this season because he's coming into game shape. So he's already ahead of the curve this year.
Nuts. So to be fair, his numbers were incredible. I think he averaged like 32, 8, and 8.
Yeah,
still his numbers were crazy, but still. The point is, in addition to all the issues with the supporting cast, you mentioned how bad the front court was. It's a lot of pressure on Lively because he's going to need to be not just a guy who gives them minutes, but a guy who basically becomes a defensive anchor for this team, which could be an issue because foul trouble is a concern at Duke. But I want to read off the actual front court depth for this team. It might be the saddest collection of centers I've seen in the entire league. Dwight Powell, Rashawn Holmes, Derek Lively, JaVale McGee. What are we doing here? Like, what the hell is this? Like, no, I can't. I can't do it. I got to go on the under. I do think, once again, when you're looking at the supporting cast, I didn't even mention Tim Hardaway Jr., who also gets hurt all the time. They have a lot of injury-prone players on this team, and defensively, they're not going to be good. Now, I do think they made some nice draft picks, which could help down the road with the likes of OMP and Lively, and I do think Josh Green, who's been around for a year or two, still a very solid 3-and-D player. But I really don't like what this team is actually built to be. I don't think Jason Kidd's a good coach at all. Their front court's a mess. The injury history of all three guards, including Tim Hardaway Jr., is a serious problem. And I also want to address something, because we know Kyrie can also be a loose cannon. That's the one way I describe him. You could describe him in a lot of other ways, but I'll use that term to be generous. He finally got paid. Are we sure he's going to be fully focused because he finally got a bag? Like, he played 60 games because it was a contract year and somebody paid him. Are we sure it's not going to be a circus again? I'm not certain about that. He got his money.
Anybody who can answer a Kyrie question about his mindset is probably got the winning lotto number.
But I'm saying
I'm
last
not sure
year
Kyrie
would have been the year he
question.
would have been
Right,
the
that's
most
my point.
focused because he wanted to get the bread, and he got the bread. It would not shock me if Kyrie once again caused his own media frenzy throughout the course of the year. I'm on the under. There's too many things about this team I don't like. If they had a better coach, maybe I could be persuaded, but I don't think Kidd's a good coach, so I'm on the under.
Yeah, I mean, 3 years, $120 million contract, fully guaranteed for Kyrie Irving. Which I guess we're looking at some of the other contracts that were handed out. Doesn't seem too bad, I guess.
It's fine, but it enables him once again to do his own thing, to be a massive distraction because they gave him a serious financial commitment.
Yeah. This team is really top heavy, right? Like, they're reliant heavily on two guys, and let's say one of those two guys does go down.
If you want to
2.5.
Jr.
Okay,
2.5.
Man, I'm so on the fence. Like, I could see this team like being a 50-win team, but I can also see them being like 43 and like 39. And
the reason why you're on the fence is because Memphis won 51 last year because their division sucked, and you make an argument this division's not great either.
And it seems like I think to Lonte's point of why he maybe likes the Mavericks is because the other teams have so many other question marks. Like, we know the Spurs are. Yeah, I think we agree that they'll get over their win total, but they're not going to win this division. Rockets, again, a lot of questions there. The Pelicans, injury concerns. So it seems like that it's set up for the Mavericks to have a successful year, obviously barring injury. And again, like I mentioned, that's the case for any team in any sport. But
they've had a lot of injuries to that core 2.5 guys in the past. That's what scares me a lot. I didn't even mention Kleber gets hurt a lot too.
Yeah, I'll lean towards the over. Obviously, don't love it. It's not my favorite play in this division, but I think like between the two teams, between the Grizzlies and the Mavericks, who do I trust more? I mean, shockingly, I'm going to say the Dallas Mavericks. But again, it just depends on health. I think that Luka. I think like this is a make or break year for the Dallas Mavericks, like either this year or next season, because I mean, we've seen the frustration from Luka that I think at any point he says the right things in the press conference. Hey, I'm so committed to the Dallas Mavericks, but we've seen it year in and year out where these superstar players that if things are not going well, they're going to want out and they want to get traded. And again, is it a possibility that we see Jason Kidd fired early if this team is?
I think he's getting fired mid-season.
Yeah, wow, I mean, really? I think it's a possibility. I'm saying that if this team is like,
it's possible. Yeah, it's possible.
With Mark Cuban, with that much money spent getting Kyrie back, I think they're going to be below 500 or near 500 around the All-Star break, and Kidd's going to get fired.
Yeah,
I would actually consider taking a bet on Kidd to be the first coach fired this season.
Yeah, I'll lean towards the over, but again, not my favorite play in this division. I do think they do make the playoffs, but yeah, again, I do like Scott mentioned, love the draft picks. Adding Seth Curry as a legitimate 3-point shooter, I think
he also gets hurt a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, it's tough with the NBA, but
yeah,
I like the draft picks they made. I'm not sure that they're year one contributors.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else for the Mavericks guys before we get into some best bets and wrap up this episode?
Nope, that's gonna be my best bet. So
I was going to say, I think the last point I'll make is I just think Dallas is the biggest wild card in the entire league.
Yeah.
I think this team can beat and lose to anybody on any given night, which is why I think they're going to finish around 500.
similar to the Dallas Cowboys.
Well, the Cowboys tend to do decently against bad teams. They just lose every time against the elite teams. But the Mavericks, game in, game out, if I told you they're playing the Pacers, and the Pacers should, I mean, you're high on the Pacers too, I guess, Delonte, but you get my point. If I told you they gave up 135 points to the Pistons in a random Wednesday game, you can see it. Like, it wouldn't totally shock me. Like, I think they can lose to any team and they can beat any team because they're so offensively driven.
Lonte with the cutter argument would be the Mavericks dropped 140 in that game as well while giving up.
That's the game
for win. They could beat a team like the Suns.
Kyrie and Luka go for 85 combined. Yeah, that's what I'm going for.
That's why they're the biggest wild card in the league. But with that being the case, I got to assume that balances out. That's kind of why I think they're going to finish around 500.
All right, so let's get into some best bets here before we wrap up the show. Obviously, Lonte just mentioned that the Mavericks are going to be his best bet in this division at 45.5 to go over. Anything else you want to add to that, Lonte?
No, I was sprinkling on him to win the division and a little bit on the conference odds because again, I mean, we've seen Luka do it pretty much by himself in different circumstances, obviously, but we've seen what level he can go to and how effective he can be. And I mean, we've also seen Kyrie. Now, can they coexist? That's definitely a big question. But once they get in a playoff setting, I think that just like Scott mentioned, I mean, they could lose, they can get swept, or they can sweep somebody. And I think I can bet on that at 12-1 in those conference odds. So I like them all three phases: division odds, win total over, and the conference. But just go a little bit lighter on the conference, obviously.
I was going to say, respectfully, I think there's no chance in hell they win the conference, but I'm rooting for you.
That's what I like to hear.
Like if they get matched up on the Lakers, AD might average like 30 and 20. Like it's gonna, they don't have anybody. He also could trip on his shoelaces falling in and be out for the remainder of the season. AD's good every other game in a playoff.
Kyrie's gonna go out and trip him, and he falls on his shoulder. He's like, "Yeah, I'm done for the game." Scott, best bet for this division?
It's gonna be Houston under. I think Houston under is going to be my option here because I really don't like what they did this offseason. Munaf basically hit the nail on the head when he described it before. He said that they had a lot of cap space, so they felt like they had to use all of it. And I don't like any of the players they got back that they used the cap space for. So on one hand, cap space is useless if you just keep it and then you don't actually spend it on anybody. But if you're going to overpay for a bunch of guys that I don't think is going to help the win total that much, I'm going to lean to your under. They have too many question marks about the overall direction of the team because they had a lot of young talent, and now they threw in a bunch of veterans who they're paying a lot of money, who basically have to play because they're priced into playing. And now you're going to stunt the development of younger players in order to use these. It doesn't really make any sense. I don't think they have any direction. And with that being the case, they have a lot of guys who can give you minutes, but I do think that there's a lot of egos involved in that locker room, and I'm not sure if they're going to be able to handle playing for Udoka, who's going to hold people accountable, who wants them to play defense, and I'm not sure how many of these guys have actually played defense in their entire lives. I love Şengün, a really bad defensive player. I think Jalen Green's a good offensive player, never tried to play defense. Kevin Porter Jr., gets some steals, not a great defensive player either. I have too many question marks with this team. Udoka also might need a year to implement his system and once again to break down the egos of this core, or maybe they'll trade a guy or two to try to fix that. But I'm on the Rockets under. I think this number is too high. I don't see them winning 30 games. I don't see them winning 28 games. I'll be on the under. I think they win closer to 25. My dog pick, I know we're not doing dogs, but since we talked about the flaws with the Mavericks and the Grizzlies, I'm kind of liking the Pelicans division at plus 255. That kind of caught my eye. I feel like that's kind of appealing.
There has to be some girl in Texas that broke Scott's heart because he's anti-Texas teams, at least for Dallas and Houston. I don't know, but we shall see.
My dad roots for the Cowboys. I don't root against the Cowboys. I just acknowledge that, that they are what they are. There's a reason why the memes go around that they don't win any big games, because they don't win any big games. As for the Texans, we'll see how Stroud does. Let's put it that way. I like DeMeco Ryans. I think he's going to be a good coach.
Yeah, 100%. All right, my best bet. I'm gonna go with the Pelicans over 43.5. I think if you take a look at all 5 teams in this division, I think the Pelicans are the most complete team when you talk about the 3 levels, right? Front court, wing play, and also top end talent. And again, it is barring injuries, but I think that's the case for at least the top 3 teams in this division. But I think the Pelicans right now at 43.5. I think we learned a lot about this team over the last 2 seasons, right? The talent is definitely there. Injury luck wasn't on their side this past season. The whole stuff with Zion. He should be healthy coming into this season. I know he's dealing with all the off the court stuff and all that, kind of been swept under the rug because we haven't heard much more about it over the past several weeks. But I think it's now just time for Zion to go out and focus on playing basketball. And again, like we mentioned, he's only played 1 season out of his first 3 years where he played 50 plus games. And that was that 1 year where he played 61 games. So even if he's able to play any in the possibility of 50 to 55 games for this upcoming season, I think the Pelicans will definitely get over this number. And even if he's not there, I think Lonte pointed out that I think there's still enough.
Plays 60, they're going over.
Yeah. And again, even if he doesn't play, let's say he ends up playing 40, I think there's still enough for this Pelicans team with McCollum being healthy, with Brandon Ingram. I think he's just so underrated that, he only played 40-something games last season, if I'm not mistaken.
It was about half the season.
Yeah. So again, you should see these guys play. Jose Alvarado, another guy that's real underrated. That's just a pest on the defensive side of the basketball. So Pelicans at 43.5, and Scott mentioned, he took the words out of my mouth. I think that plus 255 for the division is also intriguing. If you're looking for a maybe not a long shot, but something middle of the road there for this division. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the NBA Gambling Podcast, the Southwest Division. We'll be back later this week. We'll do the Pacific Division. Again, like we mentioned, going through the win totals, division odds, and all that fun stuff. Lonte, anything else we want to mention before we get out of here, my man?
Nah, man, good breaking it down with you guys. Although it's not, full NBA season yet, but it's still good to get a head start on some of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Scott, anything else, my man?
I'm going to take my Ravens preseason winnings in the future, and I'm going to put it on the Pelicans to win the division.
There we go. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at SGPN NBA. If you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure to do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Make sure to follow Lonte on Twitter at XXLonteXX. Follow Scott on Twitter at Reichel Radio. You can follow me on Twitter at SportsNerd824. You want to support the show? You want to support the network? Do us a favor. Join the Patreon page. Just go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/Patreon. You'll see all the options there. A lot of guys are already in the Patreon or in the Discord channel as well. So do us a favor. If you want to support the network with all of our free content that we do us a favor and subscribe to our Patreon page. All right, we'll be back later this week to talk about the Pacific Division. Till then, good luck with your bets. Let's break these books off and let it ride.